Hey guys, so this video is going to be a little different from the ones I've done so far. I recently asked a friend of mine who is currently pregnant with her first baby, alhamdulillah, what questions do you have for a mum about your upcoming role? And this video is going to be based on one of those questions. So the question she asked me was, how will having a baby impact the relationship between my husband and I? Now, before I go into that, I need to mention that, of course, I'm not a marriage counsellor or a scholar or anyone with an education on these topics. I'm solely speaking from the experience of myself, my friends and my family who have already gone through this. A baby can drastically change the dynamic of any relationship. It could change for the good and you could be stronger than you ever were, or the bad, and the tiredness, stress and frustration can lead to multiple arguments. There's no saying how it will be for you unless you put things in place to work for the good and you maintain that consistently, especially when your baby is born. But the first thing I would consider is, how is your relationship with your husband right now? I can tell you my experience, but how your relationship will be after your baby arrives will depend on how much effort and energy you put into your relationship right now. For a lot of people, being in lockdown was make or break after spending so much time alone with their partner. So before your child arrives, make sure you guys are in the best place possible. And how do you do that? By communicating. Communication is the most important part of your marriage, especially once kids are involved. Men and women generally have very, very different personalities, so you need to know the most you can about your spouse. The way they think, what do they want when they're upset or annoyed? Are they the kind of person who wants to be comforted when they're upset, or do they just want to be left to have some alone time? These things will definitely come in handy once kids are in the picture. What are your spouse's long-term goals, their life vision? What part do you play in that vision? Are you happy with the part that they think you should play in their vision? Once you have found out all you can about them, and likewise they have about you, then you can discuss if those visions connect together well. And where there are differences, you can adjust small parts of both, so you can work together better as a team. Setting up good routines of communication can really help keep your relationship strong, or even make it stronger once your child is born. This could be that you discuss everything sitting together at dinner each day, or you set once a week a couple of hours to just talk everything out, or you can do reviews of your marriage every few months. You do this by setting some time aside to discuss what you think is good about your relationship, what you've been happy with, and what you feel hasn't gone so well and you'd like to improve on as a couple. However, an important part of doing that review is that you tell your partner the negative things in the nicest way possible, without putting any direct blame on them. And also on the other side, that you can take the negative they say without getting overly offended or emotional. You're both doing this with the intention of improving your marriage, so make sure you have a chilled environment and don't take anything to heart. Once you've done that and you feel you and your spouse are in a good place, you can think about how things will change now there will be a baby. What role are you playing as a mother? Do you want to work, or are you going to be staying home with the baby? Are you going to be solely breastfeeding, or are you going to give your baby breast milk in a bottle or a formula, in which case your husband can do some of the feeds? Who's going to be the one waking up with baby in the middle of the night? Are you going to sleep train your baby? Some of these decisions you can probably make yourself, but I'd strongly recommend you discuss every decision with your husband. Even if he doesn't make the final say, he might think of some pros and cons that you previously didn't, and it will make him feel that he's more part of the process. I'd say have this conversation as early as possible, whether that means it's before you get pregnant, or if not during your pregnancy, or even if you've already had your child, do it as soon as possible. There's never too early of a time. But don't stress if you're late in your pregnancy or you've already had your baby. You can still do this. I say this because this is a 24/7, almost lifelong commitment you guys are making. Then you both need to hold yourselves to account with your responsibilities. This will prevent any arguing later, inshallah. Setting out and discussing these decisions together before the baby is born will give you some kind of idea how each other picture the parenting process to be. Know that not everything will go your way, and likewise not everything will go his way. Parenthood is a messy journey, and you'll likely change your mind on a lot of these decisions, and that is okay. But when you're thinking differently to how you've previously discussed, make sure you update your spouse on how you're currently seeing it, and find out what he thinks of your latest thoughts. Once your baby is born. Once your baby is born, it will be an emotional roller coaster. You'll likely be a hormonal mess and want to blame everything in the world wrong on your husband. The journey of pregnancy and labor into motherhood is one of the most difficult things I've experienced, but it was so worth it, and not only do you come out with a beautiful tiny version of yourself, it can really add something amazing to your relationship. A common goal of raising your children to be the best people and best slaves of Allah that they can be. Soon after the birth of your baby, you may feel a bit touched out. From the experience of birth to breastfeeding and having someone attached to you for half of the day, it can make you feel like if anyone even hugs you, you're going to go crazy. This is where that communication comes in. You need to tell your husband if you're feeling this way, especially if you're usually quite an affectionate person, because he may not understand what you're going through and just feel that you're distancing yourself from him because of another reason, like something he did, etc., when that's not really the case. At the same time, make sure if this happens that you try to compensate for this in other ways, like nice words or gifts or anything else which can make them happy. Of course, with the stress of a new baby, this might not be your first priority, but when you get a moment to think about it, do something, even if it's small. Another thing you need to be aware of is that you may bond with your baby a lot faster than your husband. This isn't the case for everyone, but generally speaking, this child has been a part of you for the past 9 months. You bring it into this world by the will of Allah, and you are still attached to it through feeding. So you have much more opportunity to feel a bond to your baby than your husband does. This bond will come later for him. Once the child is able to do a little more, he can play with them, etc. But when they are young, just encourage him to be as involved in changing, cuddling, etc. as possible. It's never a nice feeling thinking that you haven't bonded with your child as much as your spouse. So if you guys have prepared for this likelihood, then it can minimize some of the effects that might have come had you not prepared. And the next thing I'd say is to prepare yourself that you might get very angry at your husband, often for nothing at all or the tiniest little thing, like hearing him breathe or snore in the night. Women can feel like they have all this work with the kids, which is a 24/7 job. They're also at home attempting to get house chores done. And by the way, do not worry if you don't get anything done when your baby's first born. They're waking up to feed their baby in the night whilst their husband is sleeping, and they're comparing themselves to the freedom that their husband might have whilst he's at work. Because he is still working and he is still doing things to contribute to your team, your bubble. However, the feeling that he gets to communicate with other adults, he gets to eat his lunch in peace, all the small things which feel like luxuries whilst dealing with a newborn can get to you. Know that your husband is not your enemy and he is doing what he can as a you. Communicate with him how you feel and remind yourself of your responsibilities you were given by Allah. What is a mother's role versus a father's role? Allah is all-knowing, so He knows what's best for us. And remind yourself this is largely based on your own tiredness, so try not to let it affect you. Once you have kids, your relationship goes into a more mature stage, rather than feeling like you're still in a honeymoon stage, depending on how quickly after marriage you had your baby. This means you won't have as much time for each other, like date nights, etc. However, you become more of a team than ever before. You both come onto the same page more because you're both doing just what needs to be done in order to have the best functioning family that you can. Accept that there will be less time for each other and make the most of the time you do have. If you're having your baby during these uncertain times with lockdown, etc., then be aware of the pros and cons that will come with that. On the bright side, your husband and you, if you work, will likely be working from home, unless you're a key worker. This may mean your husband is around more for you and your baby and can be a bit more hands-on. This may be good for your relationship as you have less of that resentment of being the one doing everything per se. However, being in each other's face 24/7 can sometimes lead to more arguments too. So make sure you communicate enough and you're calm when they are stressed, so they are calm when you are stressed. Just be as supportive as you can of each other. They may not realize how much you're going through, especially if you get postpartum depression. But remember, guys can get postpartum too, and if they do, they're not as likely to be as open about it as you are. Make sure you always know what each other's expectations are and if you believe their expectations to be reasonable, and if not, speak up. If you deal with everything in the best way that you can, being as patient with each other as you can, then it can really increase your respect for your spouse. For them, after they see you go through 9 months of pain, especially if they see you in labor, and then after that seeing you as both a wife and a mother, it's hard not to respect and appreciate that person who went through all that pain to bring your child into the world. For you, seeing them as a dad, especially as your child gets older and you see them playing together, it can make your relationship stronger than ever if you're willing to put in the work. Let me know what your thoughts are if you've had a baby on how it impacted your relationship down below. And if not, I'll see you guys in the next one. Assalamu alaikum.